Hello everyone and Happy New Year. Today Nirmal and I were walking near the American River, which is not far from our community here in Rancho Cordova. And we saw an enormous bird. I suspect it was a hawk, but it could have even been an eagle, emerge out of the grass, the long grass near where we were walking. We were walking towards this, saw the bird come flying up out of the grass and fly away. And we sort of jokingly said to one another, I guess lunch is served. And, supposing that this bird probably caught some little animal, some little rodent or something in the grass. We couldn't see it. It was too far away. But it got me to thinking about the way our ecosystems work and the role of a predator in that ecosystem. Because we often think, although, the symbol of America, America's bird is an eagle. Ben Franklin, I believe, back in the day, nominated the turkey as the national bird, but anyway, it became the eagle. And so, in a sense, we've adopted that as a posture, and we even use the term politically a little bit. If someone is hawkish, it means kind of aggressive in a political way or in a foreign policy kind of way, in a military sort of way. But just coming back to the ecosystem side of this, recently I saw, one of these videos popped up when I was trying to, when I go on to upload these videos, sometimes other videos will pop up in my feed, as you might be interested in X. And one of these videos, and I couldn't help myself. It was a video of a zebra defending its baby, I assume it was a mother zebra, against a lion. And, wow. It's, and it was longer than just one encounter. And fortunately the video did not show, the lion eating lunch, eating the zebra. But it did show at one point a lion capturing a zebra baby and hauling it away, and the mother gets right in there. And, a zebra, if you don't know, is a really feisty, fierce animal. It may be a prey animal, but it is not without defense, ability to defend itself. And as an aside, I once read that, because you might think, I might have thought that, well, a zebra is kind of like a horse or a donkey, sort of in the same general area of animals, but just a horse with stripes or a donkey with stripes on it. So, why couldn't you domesticate a zebra? Well, as it happens, that's been tried, and it does not work. Zebras have come up through evolution as very feisty, very aggressive animals, and they are not to be trifled with, and they are not to be domesticated. And so, nature is what nature is. But I watched a couple of these little interludes between a zebra and a lion, and I can tell you that the lion has a very healthy respect for what a motivated zebra can do to it by kicking, by squashing it, etc. And so anyway, I just started to sort of, I won't say meditate on, but contemplate this interesting interrelationship, because a predator has an important role to play in the ecosystem. If you take that predator away, so now coming to an example from here in the United States, wolves were absent from the Yellowstone National Park and the broader area around Yellowstone for around 70 years. From the, somewhere around the 1920s, when they were basically exterminated or eliminated or removed from that area, hunted either to almost extinction or removed until 1995 when they were reintroduced. And during those intervening, and there's a lot of reasons why, among them that people in the 1800s and early 1900s did not generally, the concept of an interwoven, interrelated ecosystem was not really well understood at that point. And the fact that settlers were moving west and agriculture was taking over and prey animals were disappearing, and so wolves were starting to attack livestock, which didn't sit well with the settlers because that's what they were planning to live on. So there were a number of pressures involved in this, and it was sort of generally understood that wolf packs were wantonly killing off livestock when in fact they were trying to stay alive. But anyway, coming to the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone in 1995, there was a concern that they would wipe out the elk populations and the deer populations because they had been gone for so long. Those populations had expanded and even probably expanded too much to the point where it was having a real negative impact on the ecosystem of Yellowstone. What they discovered, interestingly, is that initially those populations did diminish a little bit. A little bit means like 5 to 10%. But what happened was very interesting and very much more nuanced, is that dozens of other species that had begun to diminish in population, and in some cases were even threatened in population, were now starting to thrive again because wolves were now in the ecosystem again. And one of the main impacts or influences that the reintroduction of the wolf had was it moved the elk and the deer away from the banks of rivers, where they would feast on the young willow shoots coming up, little willow trees, and little bushes and sprouts coming up along the riverbank, because it was easy to do and there was no danger for them to be there. The reintroduction of the wolf meant that was a dangerous area for them to be, so they moved elsewhere. It didn't diminish their population, it just shifted their behavior, which meant that the banks of the rivers no longer eroded, silting up the rivers, causing the rivers to move, causing fish to not thrive. I mean, just dozens and dozens of other species were impacted by this. And all it did was change the behavior of the elk and the deer. And it just fascinated me because we tend to think, I know in my life, I remember the wildlife videos, on TV when I was a little kid, and you'd see the wildebeest or the gazelle, the sweet little animal loping across the savannah in Africa, and here comes the big bad lion chasing it, and everybody, or the tiger, and everybody's rooting for the little prey animal. Oh, get away, get from the bad lion who's going to eat you for lunch. And the interesting thing is, I have no way of studying the particulars of this statistically. Maybe somebody has done this, but I would just speculate that on average, an encounter of a prey animal and a predator chasing a prey animal, how often does lunch get served? I don't think it's all that often. I think predators chase prey way more often than they actually catch them. I mean, if you do the math, if every fox caught every rabbit, there would be no rabbits, which would lead to there being no foxes because they would stop having something to eat. And if every rabbit escaped every fox, then the rabbit population would begin to go crazy. And again, the foxes would die off because they wouldn't have anything to eat. It's just interesting to note how there is this balance. And we could think of, and this is where I'm going with this, we could think of a number of things in our lives as predators, not evil, but influencing our lives and our circumstances. So just as a broad example, death is a kind of predator. Any given day, how many people die out of 10,000? A handful, not even 100. And yet, we're aware of death. We're aware of the danger of death. We're aware of making behavior, adjusting our behavior in such a way that we don't get in the way of death, that we don't put ourselves in danger of death. I mean, there are daredevils and people who, fly in squirrel suits, along the edge of mountains and, pop their parachute, jump off buildings and pop parachutes just in time to land safely on the ground. Yes, there are people who love that adrenaline, but I mean, talking just about the general population, most people have a great fear of death, and it influences their life. This pandemic is a kind of predator. 2020, we've been exposed to this, and it's influencing our behavior. It's influencing what we do and how we think about things. Is it designed to kill all of us? No, it's not. Is it designed to influence us? Absolutely. It's doing so whether we like it or we don't like it. We may totally dislike and feel horrified at the influences that it has had. Yes, okay. And some of those things we will adjust in times going forward. But note its influence, because we can never entirely escape influence. And if we remove that predator, there was a lovely movie that we watched years ago with Swamiji, quite a number of times actually, called Death Takes a Holiday, made in the 1930s. A very unusual movie coming out of Hollywood. Actually very spiritual in an odd kind of way. But death took the form of a human being and took a holiday for a few days, which meant that nobody died, which meant people could do all kinds of crazy things and did do all kinds of crazy things, and nobody died. And it just was interesting to watch how people's behavior changed. I would suggest that as we are looking now towards the new year coming up very soon, that we observe the influences that 2020 has brought into our lives. Examine the effect on our own lives. Don't label those effects as automatically negative or automatically positive. They are no more negative or positive than the sunshine and the nightfall, the summer or the winter. They represent an adjustment that we have to make and learn from. And if we learn the lessons of 2020, I'm convinced that 2020, we will learn how to navigate through 2021. And so I would like to just invite us collectively to do that, to spend the next day or two and just reflect, or even just a few minutes of the next day or two. Reflect on the influences of 2020. It's easy to label 2020, oh, it's a bad year. Oh, our normal life went away. We couldn't live the way we like to live. Well, maybe lots of elk would have said the same thing in Yellowstone. Oh, we were no longer able to browse on all those wonderful, tender little willow shoots. Oh, it's so much harder to get food up in the hills. Yeah, well, but you were destroying the ecosystem. Well, we didn't know about that. Well, yeah. So we learn. We learn as we grow. We grow as we learn. Let's learn the lessons of 2020 as we move into 2021, and we will see God's hand, not as a predator, perhaps as an influence, but ultimately as a blessing. Namaste.